For decades, we built an invisible world, a tapestry of fiber optic cables, satellite links, and servers that became the central nervous system of human civilization. We called it the Internet. It facilitated trade, governed infrastructure, and connected billions. A utility so fundamental we forgot it was a single point of catastrophic failure. It was the air we breathed, digitally speaking, until the night the air vanished. The event began not with a bang, but a sudden, terrifying silence. At exactly 3 o'clock Coordinated Universal Time, the Internet stopped. Not a slow degradation, but an instantaneous, global collapse of the fundamental routing protocols. Every connection, every ping, every packet of data failed to find its destination, resulting in the digital equivalent of a full-body seizure. The cause was immediate, total, and worldwide. Our scenario is simple and absolute, a global, unrecoverable Internet failure lasting exactly 72 hours. This means no DNS resolution, no cloud services, no international banking, and critically, no communication infrastructure that relies on the TCP/IP stack. We assume local, non-networked systems, like landlines and most radio, remain operational, acting as the sole, frayed threads of connection. In the first moments, the world assumed a localized problem, a server hiccup in a distant country, a routing error in a major city. Individual users checked their modems, rebooted their routers, and cursed their service providers. The confusion was geographically isolated, a universal shrug of digital annoyance. Before the horrific realization dawned, this was not a local issue. This was everything. 72 hours of total global network silence translates to 4,320 minutes of economic stagnation and an untold measure of human anxiety. It's not just streaming movies or social media that vanish. It's the digital handshake that authenticates a passport, the algorithm that guides a cargo ship, and the complex software that keeps a nuclear power plant's systems in sync. The world has just been severed from its own brain. The immediate human reaction was one of bewilderment. Text messages failed to send. Email inboxes remained stubbornly empty. The familiar loading wheel of the network-dependent phone became a permanent fixture. Billions of messages, requests for help, reassurances, or even mundane communications simply vanished into the digital void, creating the first wave of uncertainty. In network operations centers around the world, alarm bells were ringing. Engineers watched in horror as the core infrastructure, the global DNS backbone, went dark. The Internet protocol was still technically functional, but without the domain name system to translate web addresses into usable numbers, the map of the network was instantly erased, rendering the entire global system useless. Within 30 minutes, this was no longer a tech problem. It was a crisis. Major corporations, entirely reliant on cloud computing for everything from payroll to inventory, watched their operations flatline. Governments mobilized emergency protocols. But the primary tool for interagency coordination, secure, digital networks, was gone. forcing officials into reliance on decades-old secure landline and radio communication. The impact on air travel was swift and dramatic. Flight control systems, heavily dependent on real-time networked communication for weather data, flight plan updates, and transponder coordination, executed immediate, mandatory ground stops globally. Thousands of planes mid-flight were forced to revert to purely analog, radio-based navigation and communication, stressing systems and controllers to the absolute limit. The digital news cycle, once an unending torrent of information, choked and died. Online news portals failed. Broadcast networks, though still on air, struggled to verify the scope of the problem. Their primary sources, online reports, government websites, and secure email, were inaccessible, creating a dangerous vacuum where verified information should have been. The world's public squares, the social media platforms that hosted billions of interactions daily, went quiet. For the first time in a generation, the constant, instant stream of global communications simply ceased. This was perhaps the most profound psychological shift, the sudden loss of the collective, real-time pulse of humanity. The instant the financial trading platforms failed, the global stock market ceased to function. No bids, no asks, no trades. Automated high-frequency trading systems crashed instantly, leaving behind a complete paralysis of capital. The world's largest exchange of wealth stopped mid-sentence, waiting for a restart that seemed impossibly distant. Banking became instantly localized and paper-based. ATM networks failed as they could no longer connect to central servers for authorization. Digital transfer ceased. Millions found their money inaccessible, leading to immediate liquidity problems. Only branches with paper records and established offline protocols could process essential withdrawals. Vast numbers of businesses, from Fortune 500 companies to corner shops, discovered the fatal flaw in their reliance on the cloud. Cloud-hosted data, software, and operational controls were completely inaccessible. It was not just data storage. It was the mechanism of operation itself that had been outsourced to a network that no longer existed. Families separated by distance suddenly felt the true weight of the globe. The convenience of instant video calls and messenger apps was replaced by the anxiety of silence. In many cases, the only viable contact was through unreliable, overloaded international landlines, revealing a generation's loss of proficiency with basic telephony. Necessity drove the swift revival of older technologies. Fax machines, long relegated to obsolescence, suddenly became crucial for transmitting documents between functional offices. Shortwave and AM radio stations, still operating outside the internet backbone, saw their listenership soar as the public desperately sought any source of reliable, external information. The collective knowledge base of humanity, Wikipedia, scientific journals, repair manuals, was locked away. Professionals across all fields, from medicine to engineering, suddenly had to rely solely on their training and the physical books and manuals they had on hand, highlighting a dangerous over-reliance on searchable, accessible digital data. With networked flight plans gone, Pilots relied on printed navigational charts and direct radio contact. Controllers had to manually track aircraft using primary radar, requiring an intense focus and discipline largely forgotten since the 1970s. The sheer volume of global air traffic was unmanageable, necessitating a near-total stop of non-essential flights. Vast cargo ships at sea, though equipped with satellite navigation, lost the ability to receive real-time weather and port updates, and critically, lost access to digital manifests and customs pre-clearance. Global shipping began to slow dramatically, creating a backlog of goods that would have cascading effects on supply chains. Trucking logistics, which operate on just-in-time digital routing and tracking, ground to a halt. Drivers, unable to receive new routes or confirm delivery locations, were forced to rely on paper maps and limited radio communication. Fuel delivery and perishable goods transport immediately became unpredictable and scarce. The modern electrical grid is a masterpiece of networked sensors and automated response. When the network failed, these systems had to be isolated and managed locally. Engineers feared large-scale blackouts, as the delicate balance of supply and demand could no longer be managed with real-time, internet-driven precision, necessitating manual load shedding in some regions. Municipal water treatment and waste management facilities, often controlled remotely via network links, had to scramble to ensure operational continuity. Staff were deployed to facilities that were previously unmanned, manually checking valves, flow rates, and chemical levels to prevent public health crises. Hospitals, though well practiced in local system redundancy, found their ability to access external resources severely compromised. Electronic health records were secure internally, but external consultation, access to large databases of medical research, and supply ordering systems were all gone, forcing a reversion to paper-based protocols for external communications. Most modern retail outlets experienced an immediate and complete shutdown of their point-of-sale systems, with no way to authorize credit or debit card transactions. And without networked cash registers, the commercial sector essentially closed. Only businesses prepared for cash-only, manual receipt transactions could function. Across every sector, the watchword became improvisation. Police forces relied on two-way radios and manual dispatch. Emergency services used paper maps for navigation. The digital era had placed too much trust in instant network access, forcing a rapid, stressful rediscovery of low-tech, resilient operational procedures. As the hours stretched into a full day, the initial confusion morphed into widespread anxiety. The inability to confirm the safety of distant loved ones, combined with the lack of reliable information, led to a localized but significant rise in panic, primarily focused on securing essentials like food, fuel, and water. The old radio spectrum became humanity's lifeline. Governments and news agencies utilized existing public broadcast infrastructure, AM, FM, and shortwave, to issue verified, basic guidance. The voice of authority, stripped of its digital gloss, spoke directly to the public, offering a crucial anchor in the information vacuum. In an unprecedented move, Governments had to issue guidance packets via print media, public broadcast, and even police loudspeaker announcements. The message was simple: stay calm, rely on local resources, and prioritize analog communication. The very nature of governance had been forced back to a localized, personal model. Despite official attempts, the information void was quickly filled by rumor. Without the internet to provide instant, cross-referenced verification, wild speculation about the cause and duration of the blackout spread rapidly through word of mouth and unverified analog media, proving that misinformation is not solely a digital phenomenon. In cities and towns, communities began to self-organize. Libraries, community centers, and local radio stations became ad hoc information hubs, printing out essential notices, relaying broadcast messages, and acting as physical meeting points for those seeking news of family members. For a smaller segment of the population, the enforced silence brought a strange, counterintuitive sense of calm. The sudden absence of the constant barrage of digital notifications, news, and social comparison allowed for a focused, local existence, revealing a deeply ambivalent relationship with the technology that had controlled their attention. Law enforcement noted an immediate shift in criminal activity. Cybercrime instantly ceased. However, localized crimes of opportunity, such as looting of small stores and property theft, increased in regions where the public order was most stressed, partially due to the failure of widespread networked surveillance systems. The blackout forced people to physically interact and move to communicate. Instead of sending an email, they walked to the office. Instead of a video call, they drove to a relative's house. This sudden, forced return to the physical world highlighted the profound distance the internet had placed between people and their immediate environment. The global economy had effectively been placed in a state of suspended animation, with no trading, no interbank wire transfers, and no networked logistics. The world had lost X dollar amount per hour, a figure so vast it would take weeks to properly calculate. But the productivity losses were monumental and instantaneous. International customs and regulatory bodies, unable to process digital manifests and security checks, imposed severe limitations on cross-border traffic, the trade of goods, from raw materials to finished electronics, came to a bottlenecked crawl, guaranteeing months of supply chain headaches even after the network returned. Companies built on software as a service or highly interdependent digital workflows experienced near-total productivity collapse. Millions of knowledge workers could do virtually nothing. The event exposed how deeply modern work has become inseparable from ubiquitous, high-speed connectivity. The insurance and risk modeling industries faced a reckoning. Their models, predicated on localized, manageable network failures, were rendered useless by this catastrophic event. The assessment of damage and liability for a 72-hour worldwide loss of connectivity was a financial challenge on a scale never before encountered. A major long-term issue was the synchronization of global financial ledgers. For 72 hours, trillions of dollars of potential transactions were held in limbo when the network returned. The process of reconciling and verifying every single financial claim across every global Institution would take months, ensuring continued economic friction. After 70 to agonizing hours, the first signs of life emerged. Network engineers, working blind on core routing infrastructure, managed to restore the fundamental global routing tables. It was not a grand reboot, but a slow, cautious reignition, starting with the most essential governmental and military networks. The return of the network exposed the secondary disaster, data desynchronization. For 3 days, countless local servers had continued to operate, logging transactions and data that were now out of sync with the global ledger. The effort required to manually reconcile this data corruption would be enormous and error-prone. Essential services were prioritized for full connectivity, aviation control, core financial networks, and hospital information systems were brought back online first. The process was painstakingly slow, involving layered security checks to ensure the blackout had not masked a deeper, malicious intrusion. When consumer connectivity returned, the reaction was overwhelming. A tidal wave of stored communications, emails, texts, social media posts, finally flooded the network. The initial global relief was tempered by the realization of the massive backlog of work and communication that lay ahead. The event, regardless of its cause, provided a brutal proof of concept for the vulnerability of a completely connected world. Security protocols were immediately re-evaluated. The focus shifted from preventing intrusion to ensuring essential systems could function entirely without external network access. Governments and major corporations began massive, multi-billion-dollar efforts to de-internetize critical infrastructure. This meant investing heavily in local, physical redundancies, satellite alternatives, and establishing completely isolated, hardened communication networks for essential services. The concept of total digital reliance was officially declared a fatal risk. The 3-day silence became a defining moment. It was a stark reminder that the digital world, for all its convenience and power, remains a fragile construct. Humanity had looked into the abyss of its own over-reliance and seen the darkness. The future would be defined by a new objective: building a world that could still function, still communicate, and still thrive, even if the silent switch was thrown again.